not put a compressor on my voice. Someone suggested that. I just remembered. So for those of you at home, I need you to compress my voice. Do what you can. Work it out in the comments, y'all. Let me know what's going on. I agree, man. Disco. The only thing that hit disco, the only thing that really fucked disco up, in my opinion, is cocaine. I think, honestly, if cocaine wouldn't have been here, disco would, man, we'd still be roller skating. We'd still be like roller skating places, you know? Now you've got people that want to just disparage any sport that involves wheels, like in general, right? Like if you roller skate or rollerblade or whatever, you're now suspected of being a deviant. And man, isn't that like the modern day equivalent of skater punks go home? It's like if you're a skater, then clearly you're a menace to society. And if you're someone who roller skates around in public, you're probably going to be doing some cocaine. And that's too bad. I roller skated a lot when I was a kid. Never once, never was there cocaine. We played red light, green light. You know this one, right? You play red light, green light. You slow skate. There was catch the ball bearing. That was a horrible idea. They basically just released like 10,000 ball bearings onto the roller skate rink, and then they turned the lights off, and then they raffled off tickets to an ambulance, and they raised money for their new parking lot, which honestly needed some work. So, you know, and honestly, the only way you could get away with contests like that was a lot of cocaine, you know, parents showing up, got all their facial hair. Dad's like, I got facial hair. I must be able to do cocaine. That'll show everybody. And so it's like, as the facial hair grew, the collars, the long collars, really, that's just an excuse to put drugs up your nose. It's bell bottoms. Guys, we are just, man, is there any kind of, man, wow, James, you can't come up with a word, huh? Is there anything that remains sacred in this? And no, then you got medallions. You got giant ass fucking medallions with chest hair and, yeah, a lot of cocaine. I don't know why those two needed each other. I'm like, we were having fun with disco. Everything was getting along great. And then all of a sudden some dude's like, oh, I think we should, cacao, you know. Anyway, what? Fuck, some of you guys are probably doing cocaine right now, so, you know. Yeah, I'm probably watching you. They're probably watching you. I work for them. I've been accused of being in the CIA before. I'll do it again. Welcome to James True Live. It is great to have you here. I agree. The music, not just the music, it's the entire vibe of disco was really just an excuse to frolic through fashion, through music, of course, through interpretive dance. People were like going around busting out an interpretive dance and stuff. Like, it was, you know, there's a lot of things going on. John Travolta literally invented the chin cleavage. I didn't know you could have boobs on your chin. I didn't fucking know that. And it really does show you why those kinds of things were so important. And during it all, what comes out? Man, I'd like to teach the world to sing. I'd like to buy the world some Coke and keep it company, right? That's the song I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. And you're like, oh, this sounds like a wonderful idea. I'd like to buy the world some Coke. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. And keep it company. And you're like, holy fuck, what just happened? We couldn't even get out to like the chorus. And we're automatically like, oh my God, let's fucking do some Coke. And oh, man. And then next thing you know, we're putting little girls in fields, asking her to say, she loves me not. Then you got President Johnson coming over saying, hey, everybody, nuclear warheads are coming. And then everybody's like, oh my God, nuclear warheads are real. Someone's walking around in a suitcase. And this is all from the fucking cocaine. Now people are like, oh my God, we will believe this. We will vote harder, right? And it took like 30, 40 fucking years for us to get those people to say, can you please drop the whole, there's a nuclear suitcase and Ronald Reagan is building Star. It's like it took that long. It took that long to get people to come back to reality, which is kind of why I sort of was getting upset with the whole they control the weather. Guys, this whole idea of us believing that they have a universal doomsday fucking device larger than anything else you can possibly imagine is not a new fucking thought. It is the nipple clamp of freedom under this auspice of what we call a country. It's our desire to, oh, I hate you, Daddy, but Daddy's gonna drive me home. It's like the combination of those things. It's sort of like we don't know how to combine things. We're like, let's take a push pop, an orange flavored push pop, and cover it in gravel. And then we will serve this. And then we will call it orange popsicles. I don't know. Welcome to James True Live. We'll just start over. Welcome to James True Live. I'm James True, your host. And, do what you want. Do what you want. Do what you need to do. So yeah, there we go. Butt chin's running my family. Yeah, Amanda, I think it's bravery. I think you guys are like, hey, you know what? Man, I can't think of that word either. The bow sprint of my face needs cleavage. And so, we have chin butt cracks. Oh, look at that. Someone's got a name. Zetetic Research Society. That is kick-ass name. Because it's like zetetic, but then it's like, no. Zetetic. That's clever. Guy probably hates me. But I like his name anyway. I'm an equal opportunity, whatever. The Wheel of India, episode 871. Is what we're going to talk about today. You thought, oh man, he doesn't have a show. Look at him squirm. No, I squirm and I have a show. It's something I like to do. I like to just do them both at the front. I keep telling myself I'm going to leave with content and stop the small talk and save it for later. And I think what threw me off is remembering I didn't add a compressor to my voice, which someone suggested. And, that goes. If you remember last time, though, we did discuss the idea of a man living 80,000 years. If you remember, we talked about how we discussed Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism yesterday, and their influences in China. And one of the really interesting characters in that menage a trois of China was the Master Changchun. Changchun was a Taoist priest. And no one knew how old he was. And back then, they thought he was 400 years old. They did. They were like, see that old dude? Fucker's 200 years old. And then someone else goes, no. I heard he was 250. And then another guy's like, dude, he's at least 300 years old. And it went off. It's kind of like they can see clouds in the morning to they control a 1.5 trillion megawatt hurricane because there's a patent. There's a patent. And if they have a patent to control weather filed in the U.S. Patent Office, that means it's true. Which means we have warp drive. There's actually a patent for warp drive. There's a patent for invisible potato chips filed right now. You can go check it out. It's hard to find because you think that this page is intentionally left blank. It's not. It's invisible potato chips. There's a patent for that. There's a patent for whatever anyone has ever applied for. In fact, they have AI now that literally just write patents. They're like, you know what? I have a patent for patents. Someone came up with that. They're like, oh my God, you patented the idea of patenting things? Oh, fuck. You just trumped us all. Oh my God, this guy owns the patent on patenting. Who owns? I bet it's someone named Patton. What do you think? It's probably some dude named Patton. And he was like, everyone's like sitting around going, I'm going to patent water cars, right? Because for some reason, the dude who invented water cars didn't actually write down the white paper, didn't actually like create like a little schematic. He was like, no, I'm going to build it. I'll just build it. I don't need an outline. And now that I've built it, I'm going to drive it around, but I'm still not going to actually like write down how it works. And if anyone wants to like open the door and like take a sketch, they're going to think it's not that important. But now we've lost water cars. We've lost water cars because he didn't patent it. And if he would have patented it, all of us would be driving around in water cars. And by the way, I am a water car. I am 97% water. You are a fucking water car. All of us are water cars, but we're like, we don't have water cars. How terrible is this? We don't have water car. Am I being too harsh on? Oh, I am. I'm being too harsh. I'd like to buy the world some Coke and keep it company. That's the song I'd like to teach the world to sing for 80. Okay, so 80,000 years is what we discussed last time. That the idea going around China is that the perfect man, the man who understands everything, is the man who lives for 80,000 years. And we discussed how in 80,000 years, these people that knew everything slowly were forgetting things because there would be people that were born into the world who did not have skill. Remember that? That was a specific word. It was the skillless. And so suddenly the skill began to fall. China has the opposite. It's not the ascension of man, it's the fall of man. And so the man slowly loses his skill over time. And as he loses his skill, he doesn't live 80,000 years. He lives, 40,000 years. He lives 20,000 years. And it predicted that man would lose so much skill that his life expectancy would go down to 10 years old. 10 years. And that he would reach sexual maturity, if you remember it, at age 5, in 5 years. And that only during that time, would a new enlightened man rise, and that skill would return only after all of the skill was gone. So the Chinese myth is the not the rising of consciousness, but the forgetting of consciousness. I don't mean to say Chinese myth. It's more of just Eastern thinking. Eastern thinking is the Shih Tzu. Remember the 2 Shih Tzus of Himalayas? Some of you guys didn't watch last time. You're like, oh fuck, I gotta look. No, don't worry about it. It's 2 white lion dragons, kind of look like Shih Tzus, and they are climbing on either side of the red and blue mountain. And if you look at the Tibetan flag, which is outlawed in China, which is kind of funny, you have this red and blue rays, your red eye and your blue eye, mastering the centered yellow sun between. Requires you to master both dragons, and that the entire world, Gaia herself, would be rising into her own sort of consciousness and remembering herself, whichever way you want to look at it. If you want to say that she knew it all, then she forgot, or if she knew nothing and then she gained. The difference, though, that I want you to be aware of is that Chinese, sorry, I said it again, the Eastern philosophy has the cyclical part of it already built in. Western thinking is the linear of the pair. It's Western thinking that thinks there was a beginning, that's myth 1. Even if there is one, even if there is a beginning, it's still a myth to say that. I hope you'll appreciate that, but it's true. So Western thought was, in the beginning, we knew nothing. And over time, we slowly learned things. And then we remembered things. And many in Western thought will think, and then we will forget because we'll fuck it up. And, cocaine disco kind of proves itself. Like, you have the world, right in the palm of your hands, and you snort it up your nose. So even that, the decline of Western civilization is definitely built in. You know that. In fact, most of us want to decline before we declined. It's weird, but Chinese actually has the rebuilt the Eastern, sorry, the Eastern idea already has that you will forget, only because then we will remember. So the idea of it being cyclical is almost like it's kind of hard to not imagine it that way. Just like it's kind of hard to not imagine it linearly in our way. What did I just describe to you? I just described to you a line and a circle. Do you remember that cartoon of the line and the circle? God, I hope you do. This line falls in love with this circle, and the circle thinks the line's too square. And then the circle meets a squiggly, and the squiggly does cocaine and like plays jazz music. Do you remember this? And the squiggly takes her out on the town, and they go dancing. He gets her pregnant, and then okay, maybe that didn't happen, but you know, you can kind of see what happens next. The squiggly guy is a rambling man. You know, he's a rambling noodle. And the straight line wants to be there for the circle, but now she's preggers, and you know, he doesn't want to be in a triangulated relationship. He's a line. He's not a triangle. He's learned these lessons last time, so he's like, look, I love you, but I don't love you because I can't love myself and love you at the same time because you have this thing with the squiggly line. Meanwhile, what is squiggly line doing? He's fucking doing cocaine. He's like, hey, let's go disco, let's go ride a roller skate, you know, and it's a story, the story of all creation. It's completely right there. I'll get back to it. The Genghis Khan, not his real name, by the way. That's his title. Like, I don't know what Genghis means, but Khan definitely means Lord, King. I used to know what Genghis means. And his real name's like Tenemu or Tenemin or Tenemu. I think it's like, someone will tell me in the comments. I used to know it off the top of my head, but I don't right now. Point is that someone as famous as Genghis Khan, and how famous could he be if you don't even know his name? But Genghis Khan believes that there are people in the north, specifically the Taoists in the north, practicing the dragon clan Taoistic practice specifically, and that they had the reputation of immortality. That these Taoist priests didn't die. And Genghis, as he's tackling, as he's conquering most of creation anywhere he goes, and whether or not he's real, there's an interesting debate about that. It does seem like he is. Maybe the credit that he's given is sort of exaggerated when it was more of like a confederacy kind of, who knows. But the point is that someone this famous believed that there were people that lived forever, and he conquered their lands. And one of the things Genghis was known for was assimilation. He was the most pragmatic general in the world because his goal wasn't necessarily to kill people, it was to swallow people. And the swallowing would either take or it wouldn't take. And if it wouldn't take, he'd be pretty fucking brutal, and he built up a reputation for himself. But if it would take, he'd much rather swallow than eat. It's kind of a weird analogy, but yeah, we're going to go with it. And so part of his success is the assimilation into different thoughts, one of which is Taoism. So he's out conquering the world. He's gotten as far as, I want to say Turkey. Then he's like heading down south. He comes back over towards India. And the entire time, years earlier, he said, I want you to send me the wisest Taoist, bring them to my court, writes a letter, send me your wisest monk to explain to me the philosopher's stone, i.e. the key to immortality. So, Master Changchun, this dude, sets out. He gets the letter in March. The following winter, he comes to Genghis's palace. He gets there, and Genghis is gone. Genghis is gone. That's what happens back then. It's like, well, where's Genghis? He's like, oh, he's in Turkey. And the monk's like, well, fuck. So he waits in the winter because it's cold. Spring comes, and he goes to follow Genghis. He tries to track down Genghis all over the world. It takes him like another 6 months. and he has to follow Genghis on his campaign. He finally reaches Genghis, and the two of them hit it off. They're just like balls to the wall brothers. They're just like, fuck yeah, dude, you rock. And I think one of the reasons why Genghis liked this guy was, quite frankly, he told Genghis the truth. Master Changchun, the Taoist, told Genghis that there is no immortality, that there is nothing that he can tell him that will grant him immortality. And that's a pretty ballsy thing. That's some serious, you got to hand it to Changchun, everybody Changchun tonight, because that took some balls to look the emperor in the eye and tell him, look, I can't help you there. And whether it be that he was moved by his honesty, whether it be he was moved by his posture, who the fuck knows? The two of them hit it off. Maybe he appreciated the integrity of such things. But Master Changchun didn't want to be indisposable, so he does teach Genghis the Tao. He does teach him the principles of longevity. And some of those principles came through in these stories of man used to live 80,000 years, and he lost his skill. He lost his skill. This is so important to hear the word skill. It's so important. Because, hang on, I'm reading the comments here. Temujin, of course. Thank you, Metalhead. Yes, Temujin. Oh, wait, Zane Ivy got it first. Yes, Temujin. Both of you guys got it at the same time. Probably someone got it before you, but I'm not going to scroll up that far. Temujin. Temujin was the father of 11 Jin, and 12 Jin was their cousin. He was kind of retarded, honestly. 13 Jin, very bad luck. 14 Jin, really, really stable dude. Really had his act together. Couldn't drive. Didn't have a learner's permit. 15 Jin, totally drove around town. So, what I want you to know is, why are you losing skill? And why is the losing of skill related to your immortality? And if you've watched our series or if watched any of my work, you may even know where this is going, but I want to suggest to you that the Taoist reputation is hearkening back to a time when we did not need fertility to live. There is a oracle of mythology, a knowledge, a gnosis that is inside of us that remembers a time when fertility was not necessary for us to reproduce. And you might find that kind of crazy or kind of weird or not really even acceptable. You may want to take it literally and say that means that we actually lived in an immortal state where we didn't die. Or you may want to look at that as something more close to the oracle mythology, which is what I've been pushing, but I'm not sold that it couldn't be the other way too. I think all things would kind of make sense if they would be in harmony at a certain point. I'm getting off topic. Let me just say this, which is the oracle mythology would be is that there's a point inside your Elohim, your blastocyst, when you're born. You were maybe 16 cells, and those 16 cells are connected through an ionic link. The ion channels of the 16 cells of the blastocyst, it's not always 16, just roughly, but that those cells, when you're first born, when you've first been fertilized and you have your oocyte, O-E-C-Y-T-E, that kind of oocyte, that thing starts to formulate a consciousness by being connected to all the other cells, and that those cells call themselves the Elohim. And that is the she, he nature of who we are, the that which I am. Remember, the pronouns of Yahweh were that and I. There's no male or female. And that's because the cellular structure existed pre-fertility. Who you were existed before you needed to be taught fertility. All of your reproduction acts were done through the magic of the Titans, i.e. meiosis, not mitosis, but meiosis. You were able to reproduce simply by springing forth from your father's head. Or, in the case of Daksha, who we're getting ready to talk about, Brahma's right thumb. And that the concept of meiosis is when a cell divides but not using the typical structure of mitosis. Mitosis is a much more complex form, and it doesn't involve cannibalism. The meiosis that takes place in the blastocyst is more of a cannibalistic type of reproduction. And I'm suggesting to you that Genghis Khan knew that the Taoists had some sort of origin memory of what it was like to live pre-fertility. And in pre-fertility, you would be an immortal, which is why we have this psychological memory. The Oracle mythology is telling you about the Titans. The 12 twins of the Titans are actually on the Indian flag right now. The country of India has the Ashoka chakra. We've talked about Ashoka before, but don't worry, we don't need to know who he is right now for our talk. But Ashoka himself is this figure that led to the birth of consciousness, and that the Ashoka chakra itself is the wheel of Dharma. It's 12 spokes on the front and 12 spokes on the back. And that part of the learning and necessary teaching of this place was to be taught the act of fertility. And I think when you look at the genetics, the mitosis is taught through the genes. The genes are born and bred in active meiosis, and they remember, or they are taught, probably through the mother, honestly, how to mitosis themselves, how to reproduce in a less immortal way, but in a more mortal way, which is what allows us to create organs. Organs. We branched from our immortal blastocyst roots. Stem cells are immortal. You hear that? Stem cells are immortal. And the blastocyst that leaves the uterine wall falls through the archetypal, the arc, Noah's archetypal, like that kind of arc, the archetypal journey through the fallopian tubes of the Great Flood to land on the Ararat, the Abba's lap, the uterine wall, to breach the hull of the ark, to plant yourself in the soil, to drop the stones. Noah, remember Noah, Deucalion, they both throw the stones over their shoulders, and the stones Noah throws over his shoulders become men, and the stones that his wife throws over her shoulders become women, and that this is the process when cells are no longer sister cells. Daughter cells, excuse me. Every cell that's inside your blastocyst is called a daughter cell. Why? Because of meiosis, the process of cannibalizing one to create two, and cannibalizing two to create four. 4 becomes 8, 8 becomes 16. This is a cannibalistic type of reproduction. And every daughter cell, is born as an adult. Remember how Athena is born as an adult? Remember how all the Greek gods, the Titans themselves, are born fully immersed, fully aged, fully with beards. You remember that Noah himself, we spoke about, was born and had full language, hair, probably had a belt. I don't know about the belt, but all that stuff. And that this is the Oracle mythology. Some of you ask what the Oracle mythology is that it's our innate knowledge that comes from the experience of our bodies maturing from this simple cell. The stem cells of the Elohim of who you are started to specialize. And by specializing, they entered into a mortal contract. Therefore, the liver, maybe the liver is a bad example because most of it is immortal, but your lungs, your skin, all of these divisions, all of these separations are a mortal contract that you create with yourself, because the mortal contract is really necessary because that's not who you are. You are not actually a lung cell. You are not actually a skin cell. But if you've been born into this idea of being a skin cell, or you've been reproduced as a skin cell under this new fertility laws of mitosis, you would forget who you were initially. Initially, you're a stem cell. Initially, you could be fucking anything you want. You're probably going to do some cocaine because you're living life as an underarm pit cell or a taint cell, right? Or something like that. And you do not feel the same kinds of freedom that you have inside your immortal state, inside your state of stem cellios. What are angels? They got no genitals. Why do they have no genitals? Because they are the stem cell consciousness of the Elohim. And as you return to the origin of the center, you would have to forget all of the languages that you would need, because you're reducing yourself back into that blastocyst, which means you have no memory, you have no time, you have no concept of costume or face. You are simply in pure associative isness, Elohimness, as it were. Elohim and El-Her, baby. So, Changchun tells Genghis Khan, there is no mortality, there is no immortality, but you can remember the state from which you came. You can remember, and by letting go and releasing of your mortal coils, so to speak, you can return to this childlike state, which really is the essence of the Tao. If you think about it, the reason why the Tao is so childlike is because it's returning you to the immortal consciousness that you had when you were what? Woo-wee. When you were woo fucking wee. There's a t-shirt. Woo fucking wee. Woo-wee, W-U space W-E-I, is the concept of being water-like. And if you think about what a stem cell is like, dude, I will be whatever I need to be because I am water-like. And so the consciousness itself, I think you could look as, the Tao is translated roughly, loosely, I should say, as the way. And so the way, the dude abides, is ultimately the philosophy of the meiocistic, blastocystic, primordial you, the first birth. If you remember, we talked about Thoth being the shape of the embryonic brain. This is before you've even grown a brain. Your memories themselves are stored within the entire Elohim. Which is why I think we have the concept of omniscience. There was a time when your cells knew what every other cell knew with no separation. You could argue, in fact, I could prove this, only your liver can regenerate itself. You can remove, your skin does, but it's not really count as regenerating. It's just meant to die. These are just sacrificial death victims that are being pushed to the outer brink, the outer Hadrian's wall of your skin and dying there. That's not really regeneration. That's just a thank you for your service, 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 right? That's eugenics. That's not really regeneration. It's the liver that only has this ability to regenerate itself. This is the organ of Prometheus. That's why the story of Prometheus. How do we know this? The oracle mythology. That we have this story where an eagle comes down and is biting the liver of Prometheus every day. And why does he choose the liver? Because the next day the liver will grow back. And why does it grow back? Because it's the one organ that knows how to regenerate itself. And if you think about that, it kind of proves my point that not all of us, not all of our cells remember immortality. At best, only the liver, the associated liver, would be the one that is closest to that gnosis. And even that, it could only know how to just regenerate liver. So it may not necessarily be that is the secret, but it does show that certain parts of our cells are endowed with certain functions, others aren't. Your bone marrow is generating some serious alchemy, some serious magic, and it's putting it into your system called T cells. And this is some pretty magical stuff. And only certain parts of your body know how to generate this kind of medicine or this kind of magic because it's tapping into the Kemet. Probably the bone marrow itself would be the sands of Egypt, and the forgotten language that we call forgotten is just forgotten because only parts of our body knows. And so we try and tap into those parts, and we end up building a giant world mythology to get us there and tell us that. This truly is behind the idea of Castor and Pollux, the twin sons of Zeus, the founders of Rome. Castor is mortal, Pollux is immortal. If you have trouble remembering this, I tell myself that Castor was castrated by the horizon. The horizon castrated Castor, which means when you were watching the twins over Rome rise up out of the sky, there was a time when both of them would never leave. And then as the ecliptic changed, as the procession proceeded, Rome started to notice that one of the divine twins does not live forever. And so you end up with a myth about the birth of Rome raised by Canis Major, the she-wolf. Of course, she-wolf means prostitute too, so it's like this multiplex oracle of mythology, narrowing in on every single truth at once, utilizing a star cluster to convey this idea of one being immortal, one not being. That's why Pollux usually carries the flame. He's carrying the eternal flame. And another deeper way of understanding this, and I think you could even see it in this picture if you're looking at this picture now, but Pollux kind of looks like a chick in the face. Kind of has that hermaphroditic look to her, and that the hermaphrodite would be the blastocyst, the memory of the blastocyst, the memory of the Elohim, because the Elohim would have to be either outside of male or female, or the completion of both, right? So you could call that the hermaphrodite or the androgyne. So we've learned fertility, and literally every society has that concept of learning fertility. This is going to sound like a sidebar, but I think it's really, really important. I've discussed with you before how during that as the wheel of time moves, and India is all about a wheel of time, but as the wheel of time moves, as the ripple of time spreads, that the circumference of the circle gets larger as time moves on. And because it gets larger, we have to change our frequencies as we emerge, as we grow. There's a theory that the 440 hertz was started by Nazi Germany to make us have bad feelings so they can drink loosh. And that idea is that A below middle C is now found at 440 hertz instead of 432 hertz. The argument for 432 hertz is it being a harmonic frequency. There are certain octaves which show a preference for 432 hertz because it seems to be in line with the golden mean. This is a theory that people have about music, which is why they suggest that the 440 was used to introduce dissonance so they can turn you into a slave. However you feel about that is outside the scope of what I'm talking about today. I want you to hear quite simply that in the 1700s, 427 hertz was considered a classical pitch for A. And 150 years later, in the 1860s, 435 hertz was coined as the French standard. And that less than 100 years later, that was moved to 440 hertz and adopted as modern music. If you can put aside the idea of the Nazis wanting you to feel bad for a sec, and come back to the concept of the ripple of time getting larger, the resolution of time getting larger, you could see that what we find harmonic would raise in frequency because our resolution has increased over time. Our conscious ripple has grown larger as the time ripple expands, and so what we see, the resolution of what we see in sound and in color, grows. This is why red was the first shade of color we learned to see. This is why blue, believe it or not, even historically in our literature, is the last color that humans even began to speak about. In fact, most of Greek literature doesn't even mention color at all. Or when it does, it's mentioning colors that are subdued in red or bright or sparkly or glimmery. And that this is basically the extent of every color that you see. Something is either kind of wineish red or it's not. And that over time we have developed more and more colors. I can show you uh, through history the desire to not only paint rainbows, but to describe rainbows as having 5 colors and then slowly moving to 7 colors. And so if you look at the pitch of music and the colors too, it puts you in the framework where I can now show you this next thing, which is that in the Vedic tradition, in the Vedic Hindu text, in the Surya Siddhanta, one of the oldest Sanskrit texts, said that the count, this is around 300 AD, that the count for how many days in the year came out to 365 days, 6 hours, 12 minutes, and 36.56 seconds. 36 and a half seconds. And 50 years later, the Palaka Siddhanta changed that number and said it was 12 minutes, 36 seconds on the nose. And 50 years later, the Parakara Siddhanta readjusted that count and changed it. Instead of 36 seconds, it went to 31.5 seconds, and that was 400 AD. And finally, the Arya Siddhanta came of maybe roughly 100 years later. These are really rough approximations on when these things are written. I'm just putting spaces in here I'm using exact dates simply to kind of show you the progression. So these aren't specific dates, but the Arya said that it was 365 days, 6 hours, 12 minutes, and 30.84 seconds. So it lowered it by just a smidgen, 0.8 seconds. This is in 499 CE, by the way. This is how exact they were about the years. The Lagha Arya Siddhanta, a change of that, took it down to 30 seconds. Finally, about 500 years later, the Siddhanta Shiromani, excuse me for butchering these names, said that a year was 365 days, 6 hours, 12 minutes, and 9 seconds. Over a span of roughly 850 years, you have a movement, a decrease in the amount of time we think it takes to complete a year. And I just can't help but notice that this seems to be related, that as we move through time, so does the expansion of our orbit. And at the expansion of that orbit, so too do we change our entire conceptual understanding of the calendar itself. And I've put forward to you that I believe that the sun and the moon are hallucinated on a personal level inside of all of us, simply because the cells in your Elohim had no choice but to hallucinate because they hadn't even grown eyes yet. Most of your early creational life had no concept of the invention of vision, of sight, and that your Elohim was listening through their ion channels, through the cilia, little hairs sticking out from their blastocysts. The raspberry with hairs is really who you are. A raspberry with hairs. And those hairs are listening to the world. They're feeling the world. And so you would quite naturally start to hallucinate the second you pull in your first salt, your first osmosis move as that raspberry hair is to create the suction and heat, and to osmosically pull water in from your mother's body, from her liquid. And the moment you get that in, you find salt for the very first time. You find your first crystal. And in your first crystal, you're able to store information and then retrieve it back. Store information and retrieve it back. And you are fucking thoughtful now. You're thoughtful. You're wandering around a hairy raspberry, and now you're dangerous because you remember what just happened to you. And now you have everything you need to see the entire world. You do. You can remember things, and you can sense things. How do you sense things? Through the tremors of your cilia. This isn't eyes, this isn't ears, this isn't touch, this isn't taste. You are rendering the world long before you have organs. And I think keeping that in mind, it would make quite sense that you would never stop rendering the world, that you would never stop simulating the world, that you would just simply imbue yourself with organs that allowed you to analyze what your cilia are sensing in a more precise way. So what do? You grow something and you call them ears. These are ears. And what are ears? You're routing your cilia's collective perturbations that it picks up into a certain part of your brain that has a calcified loop-to-loop trumpet that you and I call the inner eardrum. And wrapped inside of that is the cochlea, and the cochlea has a liquid membrane that's subverted over a dynamic coil. And as different parts of the coil get wet, you are able to determine what you see, and that by animizing all of that from the extent of your cilia, you've invented something called hearing, that you now have the equipment to discern your cilia vibrating into a different kind of texture that you call hearing. It's now isolated, and inside of a certain tiny little sliver of information that we call sound, you're able to listen to the cilia and build a world from that. This is the eternal you-ness, is you living in full hallucination. I've suggested to you guys that your first eye, you don't have to call it that. Although if you want to be in the cult, you should really call it the first eye. I'm just saying. We won't talk about the cult right now. But the first eye, probably your pineal. Your pineal is full of brain sand. Yeah, brain sand. It's a single gonad suspended in a liquid. That liquid is your cranial spinal fluid. That liquid, by the way, is horns, liquid horns that you have in your head. And that liquid extends all the way down to your tailbone, all the way back up. It's a dual chambered, a chamber with full integrity, liquid integrity. See, I'm not a genius. Who was that? Was that Christy? I'm not a genius. I can't even think of this word. but that the vibrations of that of that spinal liquid coil are listening to the world, because the world is shaking that liquid. It's shaking that liquid. And when you have one little piece of brain sand suspended in that liquid, you would be able to receive all information, kind of like a walking dolphin. And basically, you're a dolphin with knees. You're wandering around in the world. You're living in an atmosphere that is an ocean, but you're actually a much deeper kind of atmospheric being because you were a liquid yourself. You're 98% water, 97% water. Some of you are 94% water. You really need to drink something right now. I'll wait. Thank you. So this idea that we live out of the ocean is just illusion, my friends. It's just illusion. We've created the potency to dilute ourselves enough to where we don't have to listen to it. I don't know if you realize how loud the ocean is, but it is screaming. It is one of the loudest environments in the world because you are hearing things electrically. The school of fish is electrically hearing the shark come. It doesn't need to see the shark. It doesn't need to see the shark. Why does it have eyes? It has eyes because just like a fly has all the positions of the eyes where things can be programmed in, so it can know where I need to go for where the light is. So the brain tells it this is the way out. The fly does the same thing. That's why they're so faster. They're so much faster because they're not waiting for a neocortex to make a logical decision about things. It's instant. It's instantaneous. This is another reason why I think that we don't actually use our eyes the way we think. You're at least a half a second behind your eyes if they work the way that we think they work. You're passing all this information back to the occipital lobe. You're processing it all there. Then you're passing it up to the amygdala. Then you're asking permission to send it down into the rendered Plato's cave, place it on your retinal wall and show you things. Meanwhile, you're dead. You're dead. But not when you're tapping into your primordial pineal that's suspended in this liquid. It's a sonar buoy. It's a transducer is what the Navy calls it. And they hang these things on the front of the ship and they stick it in the water. And that transducer hears every fucking thing for thousands of miles away. It knows vector, trajectory. It knows manufacturer. It knows how much fuel you have on board. It knows if one of your props is slightly has more molecules than the other props. Barnacle signatures, speed, already said speed. The boat doesn't have eyes. Doesn't. It has a single transducer plugged onto the front. So, you the cell, because we won't talk about the first eye, but we'll do an episode about that again. I should go over that material again. But the learning fertility is an advanced skill. It's an advanced skill that would only be necessary if you were a complex organism. And your organism is so complex that you're carrying around a really long, not just a string of your own DNA, but also your mitochondrial DNA too, that you've joined a corporation. The corporation requires that you carry around this mitochondrial DNA. So you have to create something else to allow this vessel to serve itself. You have an RNA transcription process where technically you die and rewrite yourself every second. And the only way that allows you to stay in this world is, did you rewrite yourself today? Did you rewrite yourself today? Well, me understand what memory is. Memory technically doesn't exist. It's true. Memory is the notion that you can remember something and then 8 years from now, you're going to remember it again. And simplistically, that actually never happens. You have a phonological loop that's constantly saying 8675309, 8675309, 8675309, and it's going to tell you that number over and over and over and over and over again and reward you and punish the shit out of you if you forget until you can remember it somewhere else. But it's never stored. You are burning calories all the time, and you have cells that their whole fucking purpose of being here is do not poke yourself in the eye. I'm the cell that's here to punish you if you try and poke yourself in the eye. That you could look at this as a neurological reef. And that the neurological reef has to constantly be fed, nourished to keep it alive, which is why we have transcription. The transcription is the fact I cannot keep this, we're deteriorating, I have to write myself again. And so you do, so you do, so you do, so you do, so you do. So the whole concept of being immortal is really a story that your ancestors told yourself, that told yourself, that told yourself, and all this is inside your own skin. It's all inside of you. And what's more amazing is that as time goes on, it's probably getting harder and harder for us to remember because the resolution is increasing and increasing and increasing. And so all of us are technically competing for what's the perfect genetic code to survive until the end time. And that whichever one of us is placed into an ark, an Enochian chamber, and stored in a Noah-type-esque outer shell of twins within twins, and that whichever one of us is considered the perfect Enochian seed will be live next time around. That's really not that crazy of a thought. It's all of us come from the same mitochondrial Eve. We probably come from the same mitochondrial patriarch, but because of the way the genetics work, that person is obliterated, that person is lost, that person is immolated, you'll find out, through the process of reproduction itself. So we never get to find our original Adam, because in order to even see Adam, we would have to destroy ourselves. Surya is the god of the sun, or goddess of the sun. It's the 12 aspects of the wheel of India that I told you about, the concepts, which really there's 24. It's learning them forwards and then learning them backwards. But before we get to them, I want to remind you that Surya is actually the precursor to Helios. Helios is the world of the unseen. It is both the sun, the solar disk, but it's also the world of the unseen. And it was India that was really telling you that the invention of reality itself is the sun. The sun is reality. And at first you might go, well, what does this exactly mean? But the ability to see something is given to the sun itself. So the sun itself is the maker, the chariot of reality is Surya. The chariot of reality is Helios. And in Greek mythology, we have Hades, who really is the other blue god. The other blue god is representing the colors that are hard to see, the unseen world. And the unseen world and reality would be the same. Because to see reality, we have to have a rendered, hallucinated sun, a Helios, hallucinated inside of our world. Why do we each need a sun? Because I cannot handle seeing the same shit you can. You cannot handle saying the same shit I can. Can't do it. I've built my entire reality off of my rendered sun. It's yellower than most. It's got more grooves. The sun rays themselves have a little bit more squiggle. They're not so straight. They're not so white, right? Each of us render our reality to our own comfort level, which is why the sun is such a base root. This is the wheel of consciousness itself. That the sun is constantly giving you a perturbation, a ripple through time. And India doesn't need a religion. It doesn't need a politic. It simply needs to transcribe this wheel of consciousness. You could call this reincarnation, but I think it misses it, honestly. It's a wheel of consciousness. The first spoke of consciousness is ignorance, avidya. And it's not actually the embracement of ignorance, it's the realization of ignorance. To realize that you are ignorant is such a huge, huge, colossal move. It requires such an abundance of calories for you to realize that you are ignorant. Sankhara, conditioning of mind unknowingly. The mind working before it knows itself. Vijnana, the lack of being conscious is still life itself. That you were alive long before you've developed something called a consciousness, which quite frankly is just a really complex mousetrap of neurons that are constantly able to recall phonologically your name, your identity, or who you think you are. The Namarupa is your name and form. For the first time, you start to hypotheticalize about who you are. And you could see how this fourth spoke would be such a big, big deal. The hypothetical itself is such a giant leap in consciousness. And you move on to your six senses. So all the way up at spoke 5, only now have you begun to even use your senses. You don't need your senses for the first 4 steps of this. The same way your blastocyst doesn't need your eyes to see the world. Your contact with the world itself. Would be the the exact opposite of where you began would be when you contact others. The idea that someone else exists is such a huge concept to your consciousness. Your sensations themselves, not just what the data is that you receive, but the sensation that you feel as a result. The exhilaration of water is something that you only learn through thirst, right? Things like that. Thirst itself is one. But thirst in a general sense. To long for something is to have a conscious memory of what something used to be. To long for something. This is a big deal. In fact, when Changchun was explaining to Genghis about immortality, he scolded Genghis for slaughtering the last town that Changchun tried to find Genghis in. He went to the town and Genghis conquered the town, and then the town rebelled. So Genghis came back and killed every single person in that town. And so the Taoists scolded Genghis for this, saying, "Hey, man, you could be more enlightened if you wouldn't do this." And Genghis did something interesting. Genghis submitted to the Taoists and said, "You're right. I have learned from this. I have grown thanks to your wisdom." And he wasn't giving him lip service. He actually put this guy in charge of all of the spiritual nurturing of Genghis's estate. In fact, a really famous monastery that's still open now was given by Genghis to this man in honor of Changchun. And so Changchun writes that Genghis accepted his advice, admitted that it was wise, and for the next 2 months, he listened to me. Meaning that in 2 months, he slaughtered someone again. But for the 2 months that Genghis said that he agreed, he agreed. And I think this is a clue, honestly, about the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe's growing. Genghis doesn't have a frontal lobe that's able to remember wisdom for more than 2 months. And Genghis had his shit together. You're looking at a consciousness that's coming online. And if it's coming online, you're going to have this Ashoka chakra that's here to show you how it's done. If consciousness was always online, we wouldn't have these historical tools. By the way, this is on India's flag. Like this isn't like a rough little concept. It's also mounted on these lions, the solar lions, which is Surya. And you'll find that same thing is Shemesh in Egypt, that the solar disk of the sun being Leo is directly related to the steps that we need to go through in order to learn how to reproduce. It requires a righteous kind of understanding. So we have sensation, we have thirst, as I already mentioned, then to grasp for something, to reach for something, and then coming to be, birth itself, and then old age and death. That this is the wheel of consciousness. But I'm not done. That's just the first 12 spokes. Now you would need to learn those opposite. Why would you need to learn those opposite? Because the East understands it's a cycle. And so by learning these backwards, do you reach the full understanding? I've discussed this with you guys about Mercury intelligence before, that the single serpent of Asclepius, the single serpent, the single medicine, the medicine, original symbol for medicine was a single serpent on a staff versus the caduceus, which is dual serpents. We have been taught by Corona, by COVID, by vaccines, by modern medicine, by petroleum medicine, by Rockefeller, and by ourselves, even by our own charlatanism, that the first snake is what we think is the truth. And the second snake is realizing what it took for us to find the truth removed. So, all the propaganda, all the lies, all the wrongness is the second snake. None of us want the second snake. You know what the second snake was for Genghis? It was the Taoist priest, after a year and a half of waiting for this fucker to show up to teach Genghis how to live forever. The second snake was the Taoist priest saying, dude, you can't live forever. That's how it works. Thank you, Portafinder. Appreciate it. Thank you for the super chat. So you can see how we are still learning the lesson of the second snake. We want all medicine to be Asclepius. We want it to be, hey man, you just take the medicine and you're done. And then you start to realize, but wait, medicine is poison. And then Mercury's like, yeah, go on. And most of us are too afraid. We're like, I don't know about this. I don't want to be giving my kids poison. And who the fuck would? Who the fuck would? You know who would? Someone who's afraid to lose their kid. This is the essence of medicine. The essence of medicine is poison. The measuring of the poison, to know which parts are poison and taking it anyway. Hey, it's a paradox, but guess what? You're in a fucking paradox. Why is this so surprising? You know, we're the ones that have created this candy shell where we're like paradox proof here because we have super friends in the Hall of Justice. You know, that's what we tell ourselves. Meanwhile, the rest of nature is like, it's a paradox, bitch. It's a paradox. It's a pair of docs. Asana, you've probably heard of sun asanas, right? These are the salutations to the sun. There's a beautiful sculpture I found showing these 12 asanas. This is an airport in India. That's not important, but it's starting to show you just how intrinsic this wheel of life is, this wheel of India, that when you track through, this is just one of the asanas, but I mean, one set of the 12, but this is how you would salute the sun. And if you start at the bottom, you'll see you're standing upright, then you're stretching all the way back, then you're stretching all the way forward. And then on the fourth move, you take your first step. You either step forward or backwards. It depends on how you use this saying. But for the very first time, you take a step in the fourth asana. And that this fourth step is the art of fertility itself. It is the act of reproduction. Now, to understand this, I think you need to read all the asanas personally, and you may even disagree with this, but I want you to see that through the Indian wheel of time, through the concept of teaching fertility, that the Surya, the Helios, has 12 steps because there are 12 houses. Yes, houses. Astrology is there, that the 12 houses that you rotate through are the wheel of creation, which is why I'm showing you this wheel of India. It's why it's so important, in my opinion, as this Ashoka chakra, because this truly is the movement of time itself. As you move through these states, you could see that this would be the rising of consciousness as you return to the first position. The first position and the last position are the same. They're the same. This is the Aztec solar disk, by the way. We've talked about this before. I realize this is a broad reach, but the figure in the center of the solar disk, or what people call the Aztec calendar, is Venus, and that figure actually represents this spiral, the ascension. It's the returning to the center. It looks like the same place, but it's not. It's the same place, but a level higher or a level down, depending on which way you look at it. I'm not convinced that the key of nature is higher. I personally think it's lower. But, we have that concept of spiritual ascension, and that's fine. Plus, with noble gases, all of us are basically competing to be helium. In fact, when you die, you finally expunge yourself into these gases. And, if you do a good job, you'll be a noble gas, right? I mean, maybe it could work that way. These 12 titans were twins. Why were they twins? Because of the two sides. Because of the Ashoka chakra having two sides. You've got these divine twins. These twins are immortal. The titans were immortal. Oceanus and Tethys. Hyperion and Thea. Koios and Phoebe. Kronos and Re. Menemes and Themis. Crius and Iapetus. And that this is the concept of meiosis becoming mitosis. The concept of cell reproduction through slaughter, right? Through what is this? This sickle? Through the chopping of certain body parts. I chop your arm off and now you have a sister, right? That's why you have the multiple heads on these figures. This is Re serving a rock to Kronos. Why? Because Kronos would not understand fertility. This is a fucking baby. Kronos is like, I don't do fertility. She's like, I know. That's why I'm giving you a fucking rock. Because Kronos doesn't want fertility. Kronos wants meiosis, not mitosis. He goes, give me meiosis. You take your mitosis and get the fuck out of here. Put it on your toes, right? Daksha. Now we have this character named Daksha. Daksha is the fourth asana. Fourth asana right here. There's first asana, second asana, third asana, fourth asana right here. This is Daksha. Daksha is a man, a beautiful man. And Daksha has his head chopped off. Remember meiosis? Meiosis, Zeus has his head chopped off. What pops out? Athena. Daksha is at a party. One of the stories is that Daksha's daughter, a woman we've talked about before named Sati. Remember the bride who burned herself? Remember that episode? That was Sati, the art of Sati. The entire process of Sati is named after Daksha's wife. I'm sorry, Daksha's daughter. It's actually both. Daksha actually has a wife and a daughter. And we've seen this same theme with Athena. We've seen this same theme in most of your Greek myths. Why? Because meiosis is the reproduction, not of a it's the reproduction of all daughter cells. A daughter cell has another daughter cell. A daughter cell has another daughter cell. You don't know which one's the original. Under mitosis, right, when the centrifugal forces, the polarities burst and these cells starts to separate, right, and all the DNA moves to one side, then all the pairs move to the other side, then the thing slowly starts to split apart and it starts to shake and tremor like that. This is a fertility of parent to child, parent to child, parent to child. It's a different form of reproduction. So we have all these references to it. So the art of reproduction begins to show itself at this daksha. This daksha is this goat consciousness. The head is removed and a chimera is replaced. What? The head is removed and a chimera is replaced. We're going to get to that. It's just going to take a while to explain, but we won't get to all of this episode. But for now, think about it this way. Brahma created mind children from his mind. Brahma is basically like the highest god, you could say, or the central cell inside your body. The first cell is the Brahma. The Elohim is the collection of the Brahma. The Brahma starts to have figureheads underneath him, sub-gods. One of those sub-gods is Surya, the sun itself, reality itself, the ability to differentiate. The reality of Brahma requires a different reality, doesn't it? Brahma is all things. Brahma maybe you could call it Zeus, although Zeus is, I think, more just about consciousness itself. Brahma would really be about the entire creation itself. Brahma would not see the difference, in my opinion, between those two things. They are the same. We are not really as comfortable with that. So we want to picture that there was a reality here before we got here, which is, I think, why we have trouble understanding how we simulate reality, how we actually make it up. Yes, Eric, chimera is exactly your intermediary. And the parent of the chimera himself, the person who is endowed with the ability to create separate organs, is the daksha. His perfection was cut. We need a reason as to why his perfection is cut. Why was his head removed? The reason is because we say that Daksha was offended by Shiva. Who is Shiva? Shiva was the husband of his daughter. Remember, Daksha's daughter is also his wife. So it would make a lot of sense that there would be a myth about how Daksha's kind of pissed off. He's kind of cucking his own daughter out to Shiva. Meanwhile, Shiva is more powerful than Daksha. And Daksha is treating Shiva irreverently, is so how the story goes. And because of his irreverence, his head is removed and he's replaced with the goat head. Why is he replaced? Because the Elohim, all the other cells in the body, saying, well, we don't want him to end. We want him to enter into a new goal. And Daksha is giving the task of creating all the people in the world. So we have Surya first, we have the sun first, and now we are ready to reproduce. Now that we can render a son, we are ready to reproduce. Daksha's job is to have 80,000 kids. That's his job. He has to have 80,000 kids, and he's got a goat head. Does this sound like someone? Because it's Pan. You probably haven't heard of this, but it's Banabjedit. This is the goat god of Mendes in Egypt, Upper Egypt. And it's Khonsu. This is the lower southern Egypt god, a singular headed goat creature. And that Pan, Daksha, all these creatures are the chimeric memory of the cellular algorithm that we know as fertility. You learned fertility by having it passed down into your genes. We call this, the Quetzalcoatl teaches fertility through maize, through corn, because by eating corn, you were remembering fertility. This is pretty advanced stuff, but we are taught how to reproduce, and we're not even taught that first. It is the fourth asana. It is not even the most important thing. So fertility is an afterthought. It's something that's added to us. Next time we'll go really a lot more into this stuff. I think I'm gonna close out now, but we have an airship tonight. If you want to come talk about this more, please come. It's at 7. All you got to do is join Patreon. You can join Patreon for free today and come to the airship if you want. That's today and only, but you can try that. So join Patreon and check it out. But next time we will look into this Daksha character more and watch how even the Vatican itself, carrying this Indian theme India, one of the things you'll hear about Hindu, if you haven't heard this before, is that everyone's a Hindu. Stop trying to say you're not. Even astrology itself, although there's certainly some ancient Vedic houses, but most India doesn't even use those anymore. Even astrology itself had no problem with the Greeks inserting their astrological signs into Indian mythology. Indian mythology is like, man, we got room for everybody. You want a goat-headed god? We got one. If you want a deer-headed god instead of a goat-headed god, that's no problem either. And so they have room for all of these different creatures because Hinduism is pure animism. And who is Hindu to try and imply that you should not animize in your own liking? These are just some of the examples, but here's Daksha. In this case, it's rendered with a deer head, but I assure you it's the same. Daksha is known to be skilled with children. That's basically what he was known for. Why was he known for being skilled with children? Because of his ability to deliver. Mahavira's birth here, it shows Mahavira with Daksha himself passing the fetus over. So educating Mahavira how to have childbirth. This is in the Kalpa Sutra. Nagamesha, this word Nagamesha means basically deer or goat head. So the head itself, human body, but with the head of either the deer or the goat. In this case, it's the ram or the goat. Again, another tie to this Daksha character. Really old classical Cernunnos. This you'll see this in Syrian lore, Iranian lore, I should say, and it's got the same antler, horned god type situation, and the spreading of fertility. Basically, fertility itself is something that is introduced to us. And I think it's introduced to us because of the oracle mythology. You could take this literally or you could take it mythologically. I think either way, you'll be blown away by how this works. We will discuss more of this next time. I appreciate you guys. Would love to know your thoughts, if you have any, on what we've discussed. But we'll be moving this even more into Daksha next time. And I think you'll like where it goes. I think you'll find it a good time. So I'm James True. Hope you have a wonderful Friday. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time.
For the
You guys still there? Are you? Because I love this topic. I should do a whole show about it, but in case I never do a show, let me just say this real quick. There, so like Vedic astrology is geocentric, which I personally love, but there is tropical astrology, right, and sidereal astrology. I bet I've got these terms wrong. One is based on the constellations themselves, and one is based on the houses. So Vedic astrology still separates the world into 12 houses, but some people, because of the precession, because the fact that we seem to be going backwards. And by the way, I think the reason why we're going backwards in our wheel of time is precisely because we are not fully in perfect harmony. Remember, I was telling you about the 440 hertz, 432 hertz. It's like that we're slowly drifting in and out of sync. And our in and out drifting of sync is probably what makes consciousness grow, to be honest with you. It's the dissonance that's teaching us. However, if you are using your astrology from a constellation standpoint, you're going to have a giant gap where there's not really a constellation that something is inside of, or better to say, you've got one constellation that's a lot larger than the rest. Vedic astrology didn't have a problem with that. They didn't mind that each house, or some Vedic astrology didn't have a problem with that. Sidereal Vedic astrology, that's probably the way to say it. I bet I'm butchering this and someone's going to correct me, and I encourage you to listen to them because I don't even know if I qualify as a neophyte. However, this is what I wanted to tell you. I was tracking down how Libra seems to be the newest constellation. I don't even have a source for you right now. But when you look at Scorpio, the constellation Scorpio, and the Aegeus. Oh God, what is the Roman constellation for the eagle? Those two used to be united. I think it was Orion itself stretched all the way down to the vernal equinox, utilizing the tail of Scorpio itself. So the original constellation was this overarching species. I think that's more of like a chimera, meaning that the constellation actually touched the four corners of the zodiac itself. What's happened is that as our consciousness has grown, this is a James True thought, so take it with a grain of salt. Hey, there's a funny joke about memory. But as your consciousness is little, you need a astrology that has a one central figure. This is Orion when Orion is alive. When Orion is alive, dominates the whole sky as the chimera. Orion dies, Osiris dies the moment that you begin to remember, because Thoth has been installed in you, your ability to remember. Now you're living in the underworld of memory, right? You see what I'm saying? So the 13 versus 12 is not just in the houses versus the constellations. You could argue that, of course, Ophiuchus is in there. I think it's actually Ophiuchus and Scorpio. Maybe those two are joined, or Libra shaved off. Or it's fascinating stuff. Fascinating. I wish I knew more. That's all I have now. Maybe we'll do a show. Thank you very much. Come to Airship. We could talk about it later. In fact, hopefully someone will correct me in Airship in 32 minutes. And this, you'll never see this. This is always on the end. We'll see you next time.